Hello, survivors. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, if you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. It's great to see how far our community reaches. Now, let's start the story. The flickering fluorescent lights of the Ethelred Biosciences main security hub hummed their usual monotonous tune, a sound that usually lulled me into a state of bored vigilance during the graveyard shift. Tonight, though, the hum felt different, tight like a wire stretched to its breaking point. My name's Liam, ex-infantry, now mostly watching monitors and making sure multi-million-dollar lab equipment doesn't walk out the door on its own. It paid better than bouncing drunks out of bars anyway. The clock on the main display ticked over to 02:17 a.m. Outside, the sprawling campus was bathed in the cold, sterile glow of security lamps, nestled somewhere in that anonymous stretch of corporate parks you find outside most cities. Nothing moved except the wind rustling through the meticulously landscaped trees. My partner for the shift, Ben, was scrolling through something on his phone, occasionally chuckling to himself. He was younger, still had that optimistic energy I'd lost somewhere between basic training and my third deployment. "Anything interesting tonight, Sarge?" he asked without looking up, using the nickname he'd given me despite me telling him I wasn't anyone's sergeant anymore. "Same old," I replied, scanning the camera feeds. "Lobby clear, perimeter fence secure, loading docks empty. Except..." Hold on. I leaned closer to monitor 12B, the one covering the service corridor leading to the Level 4 biohazard wing. A flicker of movement, too fast for the automatic motion. Sensors to flag cleanly. "You see that, Ben?" He glanced up, squinted. "Probably just maintenance doing late rounds. Didn't see anything on the logs, though. No one's scheduled for Level 4 access tonight," I said, pulling up the internal comms log. "Not since Dr. Aris left 3 hours ago." Level 4 was the deep stuff, the projects whispered about in the break room, the kind of research that required multiple layers of security clearance I definitely didn't have. All I knew was it involved something called Project Lazarus, and judging by the hushed tones and nervous glances whenever it was mentioned, it wasn't kitten rehabilitation. A sudden burst of static crackled over the main comms panel, followed by a garbled voice. "Containment breach, Level 4, requesting immediate." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the steady hum. Ben sat up straight, phone forgotten. What the hell was that? Before I could answer, red emergency, lights began flashing throughout the security hub, bathing everything in an urgent, pulsating glow. An automated voice, devoid of any emotion, echoed through the speakers. "Warning, biohazard containment breach detected. Level 4, initiate lockdown protocol, Omega." Heavy steel shutters began slamming down over the windows and main entrances, visible on the monitors. Internal doors sealed with pneumatic hisses. The entire facility was locking itself down, trapping us inside with whatever had just broken loose. My training kicked in, pushing down the sudden knot of fear in my stomach. "Ben, check internal feeds for Level 4. See if anything's still transmitting. I'll try to reach Marcus." Marcus was head of security, another ex-military guy, tough as nails. Ben's fingers flew across the console. "Nothing, Liam. All Level 4 cameras are offline. Power cut, maybe." "Or disabled," I muttered, hitting the direct line to Marcus's office. No answer. I tried his personal comm. Static. "Okay, standard procedure, seal this hub. No one in or out without direct authorization from Marcus or..." A frantic banging on the main hub door cut me off. Through the reinforced glass panel, I saw Dr. Aris, the lead researcher I'd seen leaving earlier. Her expensive lab coat was torn and splattered with something dark. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Let me in!" she screamed, pounding on the door again. "Please, you have to let me in. It got out." I hesitated. Lockdown protocol was absolute. But she was one of ours, a lead scientist, and she looked like she'd seen hell itself. Ben looked at me, waiting for my call. Protocol or humanity? The banging grew more desperate. "Liam, please, for God's sake, open the door." Against my better judgment, against years of training that screamed protocol first, I hit the door release. The heavy steel panel slid open and Dr. Eris practically fell inside, collapsing against the console. She was hyperventilating, clutching her arm where her sleeve was ripped away, revealing deep scratches crusted with blood. "It's loose," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. Lazarus. It wasn't regeneration. It was reanimation. Aggressive reanimation. Before I could process what she'd just said, before I could ask about the blood on her arm that wasn't hers, a horrifying screech echoed from down the corridor she'd just run from. It wasn't animal, wasn't human. It was the sound of pure, mindless rage-given voice. The sound of a mistake made manifest. Ben paled, reaching instinctively for the sidearm holstered at his hip. I slammed the door control, the steel panel sliding shut just as a figure slammed against it from the outside, leaving a bloody handprint smeared across the reinforced glass. Its eyes, visible for only a second, were milky white, pupils pinpricks of furious red. It wasn't one of the lab animals. It was wearing the tattered remains of a scientist's uniform. The lab's mistake wasn't just loose, it was hunting. And we were trapped inside with it. The first day of whatever nightmare this was had just begun. The thing outside the door slammed against the steel again, harder this time, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent security hub. The bloody handprint on the glass pulsed slightly, as if still connected to something with a rudimentary circulatory system. Ben had his weapon drawn, aiming it squarely at the door, his knuckles white. Dr. Eris was huddled against the console, rocking back and forth, muttering, "My fault, my calculations in the viral vector." "Doctor," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, trying to project calm I didn't feel. "What exactly is Project Lazarus? What did you create?" She looked, her eyes unfocused, haunted. "Regeneration," she whispered. "We were trying to reactivate dormant neural pathways in brain-dead patients. Reverse irreversible trauma. We used a modified retrovirus, designed to stimulate cellular repair." "And?" I prompted, watching the door, listening for any sound beyond. The heavy thuds. "It worked," she choked out, a hysterical sob escaping her lips. "Too well. It didn't just repair, it rewrote. It bypassed higher brain functions, jump-started the brainstem, the primal core. It reanimated dead tissue, but the consciousness, it was gone, replaced by pure aggression, base instinct." She gestured wildly at the door. "Subject 0. He coded on the table an hour ago. We thought the trial failed. Then he just sat up, tore Dr. Hansen apart before security could react. And the virus? It transmits through fluid exchange. Saliva, blood." Her eyes flickered down to the scratches on her own arm, then widened in dawning horror. "Oh God, Hansen scratched me when I tried to pull him off." The implication hung heavy in the air. If she was infected? Ben lowered his weapon slightly, looking from Eris to me, uncertainty clouding his face. "Doc, are you saying—" "Focus," I snapped, my voice sharper than intended. "Eris, how long? How long until the change?" Her breath hitched. "Minutes. Maybe 10, 15 after exposure, depending on the viral load. High fever, seizures, then." She trailed off, tears flowing freely now. "Then you become like them." The banging on the door intensified. More impacts joined the first, a chaotic rhythm of mindless fury. They knew we were in here. Could they smell us? Hear us? The automated lockdown voice chimed again. "Warning, multiple containment breaches detected. Levels 3 and 4 compromised. Initiate secondary lockdown protocols." More hisses echoed through. The building has internal barriers sealed, isolating sections further. It wasn't keeping them contained. It was trapping pockets of survivors, including us. "Marcus," I said, trying the head of security's comm line again. This time a burst of static, then his voice strained but recognizable. "Hub, report status, Liam, Ben, do you copy?" "Marcus, Liam here. We're sealed in the main hub with Dr. Eris. Level 4 containment failed. Lazarus subject is hostile. Transmits via fluids. We have multiple hostiles outside our position. Dr. Eris is potentially exposed. I kept my voice level, relaying facts, compartmentalizing the terror. A pause filled with the sound of distant gunfire over Marcus's open mic. Understood. Eris. Damn it. Liam. Standard quarantine protocol applies. You know the procedure. Knew. Anyone potentially exposed was to be isolated immediately. If they showed symptoms, lethal force was authorized. I looked at Dr. Eris sobbing against the console. She wasn't a monster yet. She was a terrified woman who'd made a mistake, a catastrophic one, but still human. Negative, Marcus, I said, firmly. She's still lucid. She has intel we need. What's the facility status? Another pause, longer this time. Bad. We lost contact with Alpha and Bravo security teams. The infection, it's faster than anything we anticipated. We're consolidating survivors in the main atrium trying to hold the lobby. That was 3 floors up. Liam, can you access the server logs for Project Lazarus from the hub? We need to know what we're dealing with. Any weaknesses Eris might have built in. Working on it, Ben said, already typing furiously, his earlier fear replaced by focused determination. Good kid. Eris? I said, kneeling beside her, keeping my distance but meeting her eyes. Think, is there anything? A kill switch? A vulnerability? Anything in the virus's design? She shook her head, then stopped, a flicker of memory in her eyes. The frequency. We used a specific sonic frequency during the initial reactivation phase to stabilize the neural pathways. High intensity, around 18 kilohertz. It seemed to cause disorientation in the test subjects before the aggression took over. Maybe it disrupts their function, I finished for her. Can we broadcast it facility-wide? The emergency announcement system, Ben said without looking up from the console. If I can override the lockdown protocols? Yes, maybe. Do, I ordered. Eris, what about weaknesses? Anything else? They don't feel pain, she stammered, starting to shiver violently now, her skin taking on a clammy sheen. And they're strong, unnaturally so. But their coordination is poor. The rewired brainstem controls basic motor function, but fine control, complex movement, it's erratic. The banging on the door suddenly stopped. An unnerving silence fell, broken only by the hum of the hub and Eris's ragged breathing. Why'd they stop? Ben whispered. They're thinking, I said, though the word felt wrong. Or learning. A new sound started, a scraping, methodical noise moving along the seams of the door. They were testing for weaknesses, probing the locks. My hand tightened on my own sidearm. Quarantine protocol or not, I wasn't putting a bullet in Eris while she was still human. But the clock was ticking. Her shivering intensified, her teeth beginning to chatter. The fever was setting in. Almost got it, Ben muttered, bypassing another security layer. Need Eris's primary authorization code. Eris fumbled with the ID badge still clipped to her torn lab coat. Her fingers were clumsy, shaking uncontrollably. 774. Alpha. Echo. She gasped, her eyes rolling back briefly. Got it. Ben yelled, hitting enter. The main comms panel lit up. System access granted, ready to broadcast frequency. Wait, I said, watching the door. The scraping had stopped again. Silence. Then, a soft tap. Then another. Deliberate, calculated. Not the mindless banging from before. My blood ran cold. Were they mimicking us? Trying to trick us into opening the door? Liam? Ben asked, hand hovering over the broadcast control. Eris let out a low moan, curling into a ball on the floor. Her skin was taking on that grayish pallor I'd seen on the thing outside. Time was up. Do it, Ben, I shouted. Broadcast the frequency. Maximum intensity. Ben slammed the control. A high-pitched whine. barely audible to me but clearly agonizing based on the reaction outside, filled the air. Multiple screeches erupted from the corridor, sounds of pain and disorientation. Heavy bodies thudded against the floor. It was working. The sound drilled into my own skull, making my teeth ache, but it was nothing compared to the effect it seemed to have on the infected. Then the whine cut out. "Emergency power rerouted," the automated voice announced coolly. "Sonic deterrent system offline." The momentary advantage was gone, and worse, the silence that followed was broken by a new sound. A wet, tearing noise coming from the ventilation shaft above us. They weren't just at the door anymore, they were finding other ways in. Eris began to seize on the floor, her body convulsing violently, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Ben stared, weapon forgotten for a moment, horror etched on his face. "Liam, stay focused!" I yelled, grabbing my flashlight and aiming it at the vent cover. Something dark was dripping through the slats. "We need to move. Now!" The main security hub, our supposed sanctuary, was about to become a death trap. The mistake was multiplying, adapting, and relentlessly closing in. The vent cover buckled inward, spitting rivets. Dark, viscous fluid dripped onto the console, sizzling slightly where it hit the electronics. Ben snapped back to action, raising his sidearm, firing 2 rounds into the vent. Metal shrieked, and a high-pitched screech echoed from within, followed by frantic scrabbling sounds. "Did I get it?" he asked, breathing heavily. "You pissed it off," I said grimly, watching the vent cover bend further. "We need to get out of here. Is there another exit?" "Maintenance tunnel." Ben pointed to a heavy steel hatch set flush with the floor in the back corner. "Connects to the sublevels, eventually leads to the loading docks." "Loading docks are probably compromised," I reasoned, "but it beats staying here." I looked at Dr. Eris. Her seizure had stopped, but she lay unnervingly still, her breathing shallow, her eyes now completely clouded over, the red pinpricks glowing faintly even. In the emergency lighting, the transformation was happening. Fast. "We can't take her," Ben said, his voice low. Liam Marcus said, "Quarantine protocol." I knew he was right. Taking Eris with us was suicide. Leaving her here meant she'd turn, become another one of them, potentially trapping us later. My hand rested on my holstered weapon. Lethal force was authorized. Necessary even. But staring down at the woman who, just minutes ago, had been terrified and human. "No," I said, surprising myself. "We secure her. Find somewhere to lock her in." It went against protocol, against logic maybe, but not against the part of me that still believed in something beyond survival. "Liam, we don't have time," Ben argued, glancing nervously at the groaning vent cover. "We make time." I grabbed a set of magnetic restraints from the emergency kit, standard procedure for unruly employees or security threats. They'd have to do. Together, we lifted Eris. She was heavier than she looked, her body already exhibiting a strange rigidity. We half-carried, half-dragged her to a small supply closet built into the hub wall. It wasn't much, but the door was solid steel. "Sorry, Doctor," I muttered as we pushed her inside and slammed the door, engaging the magnetic lock. Muffled growls and thuds immediately started from within. She was turning, fully. The main hub door buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal. The infected outside were redoubling their efforts, working together now, coordinating their assault. The vent cover above us ripped free, and a pale, multi-jointed limb snaked down, feeling blindly through the air. "Tunnel, now!" I yelled. Ben spun the wheel lock on the floor hatch, heaving it open. Cold, damp air smelling of mildew and ozone wafted up. "Go!" I shoved him toward the opening, taking a position near the hub door, weapon ready. The door gave way with a final, deafening crash. 2 infected stumbled in, remnants of security uniforms hanging off their gray frames. I fired, dropping the first with a headshot. The second lunged faster than I anticipated. Its teeth snapped inches from my face as I sidestepped, firing again. It collapsed at my feet. More were crowding the doorway. Behind me, Ben was already descending the ladder into the tunnel. The thing in the vent dropped to the floor, unfolding itself, impossibly thin, limbs bending at unnatural angles. It scuttled across the ceiling like an insect before detaching, landing silently behind the main console. I fired my last round at the doorway horde, then turned and sprinted for the hatch, the ceiling creature launching itself after me. I practically dove through the opening, pulling the heavy hatch cover down as Ben spun the locking wheel from below. Something slammed against the steel from above, hard enough to make the metal ring, then silence. We were in the maintenance tunnel, plunged into near darkness, the only light coming from our shoulder-mounted tack lights. "You okay?" I asked. Ben, my voice echoing strangely in the confined space. He nodded, though I could see him shaking. "Yeah, that thing in the vent. What was it?" "Evolution," I said grimly, recalling Aris's words about the virus rewriting its host. "It's adapting, faster than we thought." The tunnel stretched ahead, damp concrete walls slick with condensation, pipes snaking overhead. It was colder down here, the air stagnant. "Which way to the loading docks?" Ben consulted a small data pad he'd grabbed. Follow this. Main conduit west for about half a click, then take junction 7B. Should bring us up near Bay 3. We moved cautiously, our lights cutting narrow beams through the oppressive darkness. Water dripped rhythmically, creating puddles that reflected our lights. Every shadow seemed to harbor movement. Every echo sounded like pursuit. We passed several intersecting tunnels, checking the faded signage against Ben's datapad. Junction. The sewer, that's when we heard it. Distant at first, but getting closer. A skittering sound accompanied by wet clicks. Not footsteps, something else. "Contact?" Ben whispered, raising his weapon. "Don't know," I replied, switching my own light to a lower setting. Could be rats or... The skittering grew louder, echoing from multiple directions now. It wasn't just one thing. We reached Junction 7, a larger intersection where several tunnels converged. In the center, illuminated by a single flickering emergency bulb, lay the mangled body of another security guard. His weapon was missing, his torso ripped open. "Oh man," Ben breathed, backing away. And then we saw them, emerging from the darkness of the converging tunnels. They weren't like the infected we'd seen upstairs. These were different. Smaller, faster, moving on all fours, their bodies twisted into canine or primate-like shapes, but clearly originating from human hosts. Skin stretched tight over warped skeletons, jaws distended, eyes glowing with that same furious red. Failed experiments, early versions of Lazarus, or something the virus created from the lab animals kept on lower levels. "They're corrupted," Ben whispered, recognizing the term from the project files he'd glimpsed. "Animal test subjects, cross-contamination." They saw us. A chorus of clicks and hisses filled the intersection. They moved with terrifying speed, scuttling along the walls and ceiling surrounding us. "Back to back," I yelled, shoving Ben into position. "Aim for the head." They attacked in a wave, a swarm of claws and teeth. Our lights barely tracked their erratic movements. I fired, the confined space amplifying the sound, dropping one as it leaped. Ben caught another mid-air, but there were too many. One latched onto my leg, its teeth tearing through my tactical pants. I kicked it off, firing down at it. Another dropped from the ceiling, landing on Ben's back. He screamed, stumbling, firing wildly. I grabbed him, pulling him upright, shooting the creature off his back. "Ben, stay with me." His eyes were wide, unfocused. "It got me," he gasped, clutching his shoulder where his vest was torn, blood welling up beneath. "Liam, it bit me." More were coming, pouring out of the tunnels. We were overwhelmed, trapped. Ben pushed me away. "Go!" he yelled, shoving his datapad into my hand. "Get to the loading dock, warn them." He turned, emptying his magazine into the advancing swarm, creating a momentary gap. Quarantine protocol, Liam. Remember. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, the image of Dr. Eris locked in the closet flashing through my mind. But Ben was right. His fate was sealed. My duty now was to get out, to warn someone, anyone. Sorry, Ben, I whispered, then turned and ran down the tunnel marked 7B, the sounds of Ben's last stand fading behind me as the swarm closed in. The datapad felt heavy in my hand, a final burden from a good kid who deserved better. The loading dock wasn't salvation, it was just the next circle of hell. The tunnel designated 7B sloped upwards, the air growing slightly less stagnant, carrying the faint smell of diesel fumes and industrial cleaners. Loading dock 3. My boots splashed through greasy puddles. As I ran, Ben's final shout and the sounds of the swarm still echoing in my ears. Guilt gnawed at me, sharp and cold, but I pushed it down, survival first. Warning second. Grief could wait, assuming there was an after for grief to happen. Immediately, the datapad Ben had shoved into my hand flickered erratically. Its screen was cracked, but the facility map was still visible, showing my position relative to the loading bay. Almost there. It also showed multiple red icons converging on the dock area from the surface levels. They knew where I was heading, or maybe the docks were just another concentration point. A heavy steel door blocked the end of the tunnel, marked Loading Bay Access, Authorized Personnel Only. Standard magnetic lock. I swiped my security card, still active surprisingly, and the lock clicked open. Taking a deep breath, weapon ready, I pushed through. Loading Bay 3 was cavernous, large enough to accommodate multiple semi-trucks. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows across stacks of crates, forklifts, and pallets, shrink-wrapped with supplies. 3 massive roll-up doors dominated one wall, presumably leading outside, but they were sealed tight. The air hummed with the sound of refrigeration units, but underneath was a low, guttural moaning. Not just one voice, but dozens. They were here already. I ducked behind a stack of crates marked Biohazard Waste, Incineration Only, peering cautiously around. The edge, the main floor of the loading bay was teeming with infected, maybe 50 or 60 of them. A mix of scientists in lab coats, security guards, and what looked like maintenance staff in blue jumpsuits. They weren't attacking each other, just milling, aimlessly, occasionally bumping into equipment or letting out those horrible, mindless moans. It was like watching herd animals confused and agitated. My escape route was blocked. The main personnel doors leading back into the facility were likely crawling with them, and the massive bay doors were sealed. I scanned the area, looking for another way out. High above, catwalks crisscrossed the space, leading to control booths and maintenance access points. Risky, but maybe possible. Movement near the sealed bay doors caught my eye. Someone was trying to open one from the outside. Through the reinforced window panel set into the door, I saw flashing blue and red lights. Police. National Guard. Hope surged, quickly followed by caution. It could be a trap. Then I saw him, Marcus, head of security. He was outside, along with 2 other guards I vaguely recognized from day shift, frantically working the external controls for Bay Door 1. They hadn't been infected. They'd made it out somehow, or perhaps they'd been outside when the lockdown. Dewey, Marcus. I kept my voice low but loud enough to carry across the bay. He spun around, weapon instantly raised, scanning the loading dock before spotting me behind the crates. Liam, thank God, we thought we lost everyone inside. Where's Ben? Gone, I said, the word catching in my throat. Got swarmed in the tunnels. Marcus cursed under his breath. Damn it. Okay, new plan. We can't get these main doors open from out here. Lockdown override codes aren't working. There's a manual release crank system in the control booth up there. He pointed to a small glassed-in room suspended near the ceiling, accessed by a metal staircase. Can you get to it? I looked. From the booth to the infected milling below was a straight shot across the open floor about 40 yards. The floor's hot, I said. At least 50 of them. We'll create a diversion, Marcus replied. Draw them away from the stairs. You make a run for it. Once that door's open, we provide covering fire while you get out. It was a classic pincer movement, something we'd drilled countless times. Risky, but maybe our only shot. What's the diversion? Noise, Marcus said grimly. Lots of it. He spoke into his radio, presumably to the guards with him. I checked my weapon. Glock 19, 1 full magazine, maybe 5 rounds left in the one currently loaded. Not ideal for crossing an open floor filled with 50 targets. I tucked Ben's datapad securely into my vest pocket. If I didn't make it, maybe someone else could use the intel. Ready when you are, I transmitted back to Marcus. Now, Liam. Go, go, go. Simultaneously, the police cruiser Marcus must have arrived in, parked just outside the bay door, erupted with noise. Siren wailing, horn blaring, lights flashing. The effect on the infected was immediate and dramatic. Their heads snapped toward the source of the sound. The mindless milling ceased, replaced by focused intent. They surged toward Bay Door 1, clawing at the metal, moaning in unison, completely ignoring the rest of the loading dock. My opening. I broke cover, sprinting across the concrete floor. Keep low, move fast, don't look back. My boots pounded. The ground, the sound lost in the cacophony from outside and the groans of the infected. 40 yards felt like a mile. 30, 20. The stairs were just ahead. A lone infected, slower than the others, hadn't joined the surge. It stood near the base of the stairs, head cocked, its milky eyes fixing on me. A former janitor, judging by the uniform. It let out a gurgling screech and lunged. No time to aim carefully. I fired twice from the hip. The first shot missed, ricocheting off the metal stairs. The second caught it in the shoulder, spinning it around but not stopping it. It scrambled forward, jaws snapping. I sidestepped, kicked its legs out from under it, and fired down into its skull as it fell. Panting, adrenaline surging, I scrambled up the metal staircase. The control booth door was unlocked. Inside, the small space offered a panoramic view of the chaos below. The infected massed against Bay Door 1, oblivious to me. On the control panel, a large manual crank wheel glowed faintly under an emergency light. Liam, status. Marcus's voice crackled in my ear. In the booth, working. On the manual release. I grabbed the heavy wheel and began to turn. It resisted, stiff from disuse, metal groaning in protest. My muscles screamed, sweat stinging my eyes. Below, the infected continued their assault on the door. Outside, the police siren abruptly died, plunging the bay into relative quiet except for the groans and the screech of the crank mechanism. They're losing interest in the diversion, Marcus warned. Hurry. A few infected heads began to turn away from the door, their vacant eyes scanning the bay. They hadn't spotted me yet, but it wouldn't take long. The crank wheel moved agonizingly slowly. Inches turned into feet. I could see the massive door beginning to lift, a sliver of darkness appearing at the bottom, revealing the flashing lights of Marcus's cruiser outside. Almost there, I grunted, putting all my weight into it. A loud clang from below. One of the infected had noticed the movement of the door. It let out a piercing shriek, and suddenly the entire horde turned, their attention shifting from the silent cruiser outside to the rising bay door, and to me, silhouetted in the control booth above. They see you, Liam, Marcus yelled. Door's high enough. Get down here. They surged toward the stairs, a wave of decaying flesh and mindless hunger. I abandoned the crank, drawing my Glock. No way down the stairs now. I scanned the booth. Maintenance hatch in the ceiling, no. Reinforced windows? Maybe. Then I saw it. An emergency fire axe mounted on the wall. Below me, the first infected were already starting to climb the metal stairs, their coordination clumsy, but their numbers overwhelming. I smashed the glass case, grabbing the axe. It felt heavy, solid in my hands. Not ideal, but better than nothing. My eyes darted to the catwalks connecting the booth to the far side of the bay, if I could make it across. But the catwalk looked narrow, exposed. "Liam, what are you doing?" Marcus shouted. Looking down at the sea of grasping hands and snapping teeth surging up the stairs, then across the bay to the slowly rising door where Marcus and his team waited, I made another split-second decision. Not escape. Delay. I hefted the fire axe. "Tell Ben I finished the job," I yelled into my comm, then brought the axe down hard on the control panel, smashing the electronics, severing cables. Sparks flew. The manual crank wheel locked in place. The bay door stopped rising, leaving an opening only a few feet high. Enough for a man to crawl under, maybe, but not enough for the horde to easily swarm out. Then I turned to face the top of the stairs, where the first infected was pulling itself into the booth, its red eyes fixing on me, a low growl rumbling in its ruined chest. I raised the axe. The first day wasn't over yet, and my guard duty, it seemed, had just been extended indefinitely. The first one through the doorway was clumsy, tripping over the raised threshold of the control booth. I didn't give it a chance to recover. The fire axe came down hard, cleaving, through its skull with a sickening crunch. Gray matter and dark fluid splattered the console I'd just destroyed. Two more scrambled up behind it, pushing over their fallen comrade. I swung again, catching the second one across the neck, severing something vital. It collapsed, twitching. The third lunged, jaws snapping. I sidestepped, using the booth's cramped space to my advantage, and drove the axe point into its eye socket. It went down, thrashing. Below, the horde surged against the stairs, a tangled mass of limbs and bodies. They were slow climbers, their rewired brains struggling with the vertical challenge, but their sheer numbers were terrifying. 4. Everyone I dispatched at the top, 3 more were clawing their way up. "Liam, what the hell did you do?" Marcus's voice was frantic in my ear. "The door stopped. We can't get it open further from out here." "Bought you time," I yelled back, dodging another grab from an infected trying to squeeze past the bodies blocking the doorway. "The panels. Destroyed. Doors jammed where it is. Get your people out. Find another exit." There is no other exit from this section accessible from the outside. "We're boxed in out here." Damn it. My plan to delay them had inadvertently trapped Marcus and his team. The infected below were starting to figure out the stairs, using fallen bodies as gruesome stepping stones. The control booth wouldn't hold for long. I scanned the bay again, the catwalk. It was my only way out now. Ran from the control booth across the width of the bay, connecting to a maintenance ladder on the far wall near bay door 3. If I could make it across. "Marcus, cover me," I shouted. "I'm going for the catwalk." I used the axe to clear the doorway again, shoving the twitching bodies back down the stairs, creating a momentary gap. Then I bolted. The catwalk entrance was just outside the booth. I slammed the booth door shut behind me. Flimsy protection, but maybe it would slow them for a few seconds, and sprinted onto the narrow metal walkway. It swayed precariously under my weight, 30 feet above the concrete floor. Below, the infected horde noticed my movement. A collective moan rose as dozens of heads tilted back, milky eyes fixing on me. They started moving toward the base of the maintenance ladder on the far side, anticipating my destination. Gunfire erupted from outside Bay Door 1 as Marcus and his team opened up, firing through the gap at the bottom of the door, trying to draw the infected back, trying to clear a path for me. It worked, partially. Some of the horde turned back toward the noise, but many remained focused on me, shambling toward the ladder. The catwalk stretched before me, maybe 60 yards across. Easy jog on solid ground, a terrifying tightrope walk up here. I moved fast, but deliberately keeping my balance, weapon ready. Halfway across, I heard the control booth door splinter behind me. They were breaking through. Then, movement ahead. On the far end of the catwalk, near the ladder, a figure emerged from a maintenance alcove. Another survivor? No. It moved with that same jerky, unnatural gait. Security guard uniform, face obscured by shadows. It started moving toward me, blocking my path to the ladder. Trapped, infected behind me, infected blocking my escape ahead, and a sea of them waiting below if I fell. Think, Liam. Think. My eyes darted around. Below me, near the center of the bay, sat a large flatbed forklift, its forks raised about 10 feet off the ground, holding a pallet stacked high with shrink-wrapped medical supplies. Maybe part of the shipment I was supposed to be guarding. An insane idea sparked. "Marcus," I yelled into the comm. "That forklift, can you see it from your position?" "Affirmative. What about it?" "Can you hit the controls, lower the forks?" A pause. "Negative, angle's wrong. Can't get a clear shot at the cab controls from here." Damn. The infected guard on the catwalk was closer now, maybe 30 yards away. The ones from the booth were spilling onto the catwalk behind me. I was running out of time and space. I looked down at the forklift again. The pallet on top. If I could jump? No. Too far. Too risky. But maybe. The infected guard ahead raised its arms, letting out a gurgling hiss. It was close enough now that I could see its face, or what was left of it. Half was missing, revealing bone and ruined tissue. It lunged. I didn't aim. I fired instinctively, 2 rounds from the Glock. One went wide, pinging off the catwalk railing. The second hit the infected square in the chest. It barely flinched. Headshots only, I remembered too late. It was almost on me. No time to line up a headshot. I dropped the pistol. It clattered onto the walkway, and swung the fire axe. In a wide arc, the blade bit deep into the infected shoulder, stopping its charge but locking the axe in place. It snarled, snapping its jaws, reaching for me with its free hand. We grappled on the narrow walkway, swaying dangerously. Below, the horde watched, moaning encouragement. Behind me, the other infected were closing the distance. I could hear their shuffling footsteps on the metal grating. Using the trapped axe for leverage, I shoved the infected guard hard. Its feet slipped on the grating. For a moment we teetered on the edge, 30 feet above the concrete. Then, with a final surge of adrenaline, I twisted, pulling the axe free as the infected tumbled over the railing. It landed amongst the horde below with a wet crunch. They immediately fell upon it, a frenzy of feeding that momentarily distracted them. But the distraction wouldn't last. The infected behind me were only yards away now. I snatched up my pistol and looked down at the forklift. 10 feet below the catwalk, still too far to jump safely. But the pallet, shrink-wrapped boxes, maybe enough to cushion a fall. It was my only chance. "Marcus, tell my sister. Tell her I tried," I muttered into the comm, not waiting for a response. Taking a deep breath, I holstered my pistol, got a running start, and leaped off the catwalk into open air. The fall seemed to take forever. Wind rushed past me. Below, the shrink-wrapped pallet loomed closer. I hit it hard, the impact driving the breath from my lungs, stars exploding. Behind my eyes, pain shot through my ankle, but the boxes had absorbed the worst of it. I wasn't dead. Yet. I rolled off the pallet onto the forklift itself, gasping for air, trying to assess the damage. Ankle definitely sprained, maybe broken, but I could move. The infected horde, momentarily confused by my sudden appearance amongst them, was already reacting, turning away from the fallen guard, surging toward the forklift. I scrambled into the forklift's cab. Keys weren't in the ignition, of course. Hot wiring it was out of the question. But maybe. I looked at the controls. Hydraulic levers for the forks, ignition switch, gear shift, standard setup. If I could just get it moving. The first infected reached the forklift, clawing at the cab's metal cage. More were right behind it. I scanned the controls again. There, a manual brake release lever. If I could release the brake, maybe the forklift's weight would be enough to get it rolling on the slightly sloped floor toward Bay Door 1, toward Marcus. I yanked the lever. Nothing happened. Locked? Stuck? The infected were rocking the forklift, now their combined weight making the heavy machine sway. One managed to force its arm through the cage, fingers grasping blindly. I kicked at the arm, then slammed my boot against the brake release again, putting all my remaining strength into it. With a loud clang, it gave way. The forklift lurched, then began to roll, slowly at first, then gathering momentum. It plowed through the infected surrounding it, sending bodies flying. They barely seemed to notice, simply getting back up and resuming their shambling pursuit. The forklift rolled, faster, heading directly for the partially open bay door 1. "Marcus, incoming!" I yelled into the comm. "We see you. Get ready to move." The forklift hit the base of the bay door with a jarring impact, stopping abruptly, but it had cleared a path, pushing the main mass of infected away from the opening. Through the gap, I could see Marcus and his 2 remaining guards laying down covering fire. "Now, Liam." Pain shooting up my leg, I half-limped, half-crawled out of the forklift cab and scrambled under the bay door. Hands grabbed me, pulling me the rest of the way out into the relative safety of the exterior loading dock area. The 2 guards immediately began trying to secure the gap under the door, shoving debris against it, while Marcus helped me toward their cruiser. "Ankle?" he asked, supporting my weight. "Sprained, maybe worse," I grunted. "Where's the 3rd guard?" Marcus's face was grim. "Didn't make it, got grabbed when they first breached the door controls outside." We piled into the cruiser, the sounds of the infected pounding against the makeshift barrier behind us growing louder. Marcus drove, tires squealing as we pulled away from the loading dock, leaving Ethelred Biosciences and the nightmare at E contained behind us. Or so I thought. As we sped away, heading toward the main road, Marcus glanced at the datapad I'd retrieved from Ben. "Anything useful on there?" I pulled it out, the cracked screen flickering. Most files were corrupted, but the facility map was functional, and one directory was still intact. Project Lazarus Phase 2 Trial Notes. My blood ran cold as I scanned the entry titles. Accelerated transmission vectors, cognitive function suppression results, environmental adaptation trials, airborne strain. "Airborne," I whispered, looking up at Marcus. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "That's what Dr. Aris was working on when the breach happened. Phase 2, they made it airborne." We looked at each other, the implication hanging between us. We had escaped the lab, but the mistake wasn't contained. It wasn't just spreading through bites anymore. It was in the air we were breathing. The first day was ending, but the apocalypse was just getting started. The fight for survival hadn't ended at the loading dock. It had just changed battlefields, and this time, there were no walls, no containment protocols, just the open world and a virus that could potentially infect everyone on the planet. The mistake was out.